Well, here we are again. Hi, everybody. Thanks for showing up. I'm sure there'll be a few more people here today. Let's just quickly talk about where we're at. And this is it. We undercoated this piece with white. We added some color, any color, doesn't matter. And then we separated the light and the dark areas. Now this was all done with acrylic paint. It's easy that way. It dries quickly, so you're not worrying about painting wet into wet while your background colors have been laid down. And it also kind of plants the color onto the piece. You can't really move it. And it's fairly smooth too, so it gives us basically a nice surface to continue with. This is really the base coat for the piece, and now hopefully today it will start to look like something. I think I mentioned in one of the other videos, oh, there's a dog here, that we all have good days and we all have bad days, and I never know whether it's good or bad until I start to paint, and I haven't painted yet today, so hopefully it's going to be a half decent day so we can make some of these leaves and flowers look good for you. So we're switching to oils, and I already laid out some color here just to save a bit of time, and you can see that it's kind of mashed up a bit, and that's because I like to work the color up a bit with my palette knife before I use it. That way too I can kind of judge the different consistencies of the paint, because I'm just using the paint at 100% coming out of the tube. I haven't thinned it or thickened it, which you can do also with oil paint. Any brand of oil paint's fine. In fact, you can mix brands too. If you have a certain brand where you enjoy the yellow, or a certain brand where you think the alizarin crimson is a little nicer, then of course they all mix together. The water-soluble oils and the oils, you can also mix those, but then it's not water soluble anymore. It becomes an oil paint, right? And I wouldn't probably do that unless I really had to, if I'd run out of paint maybe. So what I did for my palette, I just want to explain this to you a bit. I have on my piece, I have some leaves that are blue-green, any blue-green, doesn't matter, and I have some leaves that I kind of designated as yellow-green. And I had basically a pink, a yellow, and a blue flower with some other yellow flowers sitting around. So what I did was pulled all of those colors. So I have a blue-green, which in this case is Viridian, sap green, which is a yellow-green. I have a blue and a red. I have my alizarin crimson, of course, which I can mix to get some pinks. So I have some colors out on my palette that kind of match up with the family of colors that I did in acrylics. And I also have the shadow colors. I have alizarin crimson, and I have Payne's gray. We used navy in acrylic, remember, because I didn't have access to a premixed Payne's gray in the bottle, but we used navy and it was fine. But here I have Payne's gray. And then in addition to the colors that you choose for your bouquet, you need to have colors or to lighten them with. So in other words, I could lighten the blue with white. I could lighten it a bit with yellow. Of course, what would happen? Turn green, right? Or slightly green, depending on whether I had more yellow or more blue. The orange is down here for a couple of reasons. Orange is a great color to use with your blues, greens, that kind of family of colors, to gray up the color. So I did put some of that down on the palette, because sometimes we don't want to use these colors as bright as they are, and so we gray them. If you I don't spend a lot of time on color theory and color wheel, but if you took the color wheel and you looked at all the colors on the outside and then just looked across from each other, any two of those colors that you mix will make a gray. And depending on what to use, for example, if you use a green and opposite to that is a red color, it will be, you'll get gray if you mix them, but depending on how you mix them, it could be more green in the work, in the color, or more red in the color. So it could be a reddish gray or a greenish gray, right? Makes sense. So, hi, Evelyn from Florida. Thank you so much. So anyway, I've also got here, and I'll just show you so you know, I've got a couple of mediums. So this one is a liquid. I don't know whether you want to see it or not, but anyway, maybe I can show it to you. This is liquid, and this one is just a painting medium. I think this one actually is Bob Ross painting medium, so very readily available to everybody. And I usually keep my mediums covered, so these little cups work really well because you can just leave the lids on them. So in addition to that, I've got my palette knife, which I'll need. I do have some paint thinner over here, Terps, which I always keep covered. And I really don't use it very much. I mostly work with a dirty brush, so just clean it out in my towel and move on to the next color. And I don't know whether it's important or not, but speaking of towels, I use just regular absorbent paper towel when I'm working in acrylics. But when I'm working with oil color, I usually use a cloth. So you can see this one has been well used, but I usually rinse them out after I've used them in some soapy water with Dawn. Hi, Shannon from California. I mix it with some Dawn to get some of the color out, and then every once in a while I take a batch of them and throw them in the washing machine, and they come out fine, and I don't have any trouble with residue in the washing machine or anything like that. So, okay, so that's the paint. That's my mediums. Brushes, I'll use basically the same brushes that I used in the previous videos. I'm just going to set this aside for a minute and tell you that we're going to start with, let me see, I was going to start with the leaves. So yeah, I'll start with the leaves. And usually I would paint the leaves that are going to be tucked underneath something. So in other words, whatever you paint first is going to be underneath, and whatever you paint on top is going to be on top. So if you look at these three leaves, for example, this leaf I'd like to have under this flower, so I'll paint it before I paint the flower. But I'd sooner have this leaf furthest underneath. So I'll actually start with this one, then I'll do this one, then this one, so they'll build, or they'll be kind of layered on top of one another. Now, I'm not going to paint all the leaves on the tray during this video. What I will do is paint a few, so you get the idea, and then we'll move on to flowers, because otherwise you're going to be here for quite a while, and you've probably got better things to do than listen to me. So, the first step when we get here, I'm sorry about the dog hair. I'm not sorry about my dogs, though. We got here, and I just want to run over this again quickly, because we're going to do leaves first. Now, that very first video that I did is probably the most important of all the videos. So if you really want to learn to paint this style, you need to go back and watch that video. Now, I confess, I did not tell you everything in that video that I know about this particular stage, the first stage, because of time. I mean, anyone that's studied with me knows I never stop talking until until the lights go out. So I told you what I thought was really important, and if I think of anything else while I'm doing this last step, then we'll go back to that. But here are the things we talked about with leaves. We talked about the overall shape and trying to keep them round, keeping them as plump as possible. Important, right? We talked about a curved vein. The more curve you add to a vein, the fuller, I say healthier, that leaf looks. So we talked about a curved vein, and we talked about what was going to be light and dark within the leaf, and we decided that the dark would be on the outside of the curved vein, so it would be here and here. It would also be towards the end of the tip of the leaf, and that end or the tip of the leaf is the spot that we painted these strokes to or from. And our first stroke came towards the spot. And our second stroke started at the vein line and came towards the spot. And that third stroke came down towards the spot. On the other side, we pulled the strokes away from that spot. So the strokes on this side pointed to that spot, but moved away towards the vein line, towards the spot, but away from the vein line. And the same on this one, because we start on the light side, towards the spot, towards the spot, towards the spot, away from the spot, and away from the spot. So it's really important that you know that, because now is when it's really going to show. So I think without further ado, we'll do some leaves. So painting over the acrylic makes for a nice kind of matte surface. It has some tooth to it, so it's easy to work on with the oils. And I don't have very much. I've got a little lump there. Don't know what that's from. Dog hair again, probably. But for the most part, it's pretty good. Some people like to sand this before they do this step. I honestly don't bother. In fact, I don't know that I've ever sanded one of the trays that I've done. They've all turned out relatively well. I don't mind little raised portions of paint, because I know my strokes are going in the right direction, and if there's a ridge of paint, it's probably going where it's supposed to go. In this case, would be towards that ender tip. So brushes. I already put these brushes into some thinner, and it's just so that any area in the ferrule here now is kind of wet with thinner, so my oil paint hopefully isn't going to stick in there before I go to clean it. So I don't want the thinner in the brush though, so I'm just going to take the time right now to remove it from all of them, because I don't want to dilute the paint. The other thing is sometimes, I mean, I'm looking at this brush right now, and my brushes are very old. They last me for years. And this one kind of looks like it might not do the job for me today. I don't know whether you can see this or not, but it's kind of misshapen up here. And if the brush is misshapen, you're going to have a misshapen stroke, right? So anyway, we'll try it and see how it works. So those brushes are ready to go. Now the other thing is, if I apply oil paint to this matte surface, depending on the atmosphere and depending how thick the paint is and all kinds of different things, even the color of the paint makes a difference. You'll notice blues and alizarin crimsons, those kinds of colors. The more transparent colors usually seem to be a little thinner, loose texture. So sometimes if you just start to paint on this surface, it kind of sticks. The brush doesn't move and flow the way you want it to for stroke work. So I do one of two things, and sometimes I have to do a couple of strokes before I know which way I really want to handle this, but I'm just going to put this over here where I can get at it for a minute. I talked to you about these mediums, and I have, I'm just going to grab some here, the thinner. This is painting medium. Now, I could cover, I think I want to do these 3 leaves for you because there's a grouping here, so I'll just turn this around. I could cover this with that painting medium like so, and you can probably see, I'm sorry, but I've got more dog hair here. Gonna have to get rid of the dogs. You can see that probably well enough in the camera. It's shiny now. I don't want a lot of medium down, so if I do put medium down like this, I just want to shine the surface, so I'll just take any excess off. I don't want the medium to change the consistency of the paint. Now, your other option would be, and I'll just grab some here to show you, although I'm not going to use it unless it becomes a problem. The other option would be a little bit of liquid, and again, the operative word here would be little bit. Hello, Indiana. So there, that would be a little bit of liquid. The thing with liquid is it's going to accelerate the drying of the piece. So if you use liquid, by the time you get around to the other side, this is already going to be sticky. Won't be dry, but it'll be sticky and probably not good to be working in it. So I don't like to use liquid at this stage unless I feel I really have to get the paint to move. So having said that, I need to clean the liquid out of my brush. That's the other thing, is you don't want it to dry in your brush. So what I want to do right now is just remove that, because that's my little lesson. And I'm going to go back, and again, I've cleaned my brush out, so I have to remove all the medium. So I'll just go back and add a little skiff of medium here. I can do all 3 leaves at the same time because it's not going to dry. And again, I only want to shine, so I'll remove any excess off so that I'm not going to dilute my paint. So the first leaf I'm going to paint is this one, the one underneath, and then I'll paint this. These 2 are yellow-green leaves. I can use that sap green as is, or I could add a little bit of red to it and gray it up a bit. I think I'll leave it at 100% just so we don't confuse the issue. So my first step was to lay down a little bit of medium, a shine. Let's call it a shine, not a layer of medium. My next step is to put in some wet color, and you can look at this and say, call it a map. This is a map, and it's showing me where I want that wet color and what color I want. So on this leaf, which is the one we're going to do, I see green, alizarin crimson, I see Payne's gray. Well, actually it's navy blue, but Payne's gray. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of alizarin crimson, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm very gently going to dust alizarin crimson into the area where it was. Now, I've got very little paint in my brush. I know it looks like a lot because it's shiny because oil paint's shiny, so it looks, you'll see the shine. But really, I have very little paint on my brush, and I only want a thin layer. The next thing I'm going to do is add my Payne's gray shadow, and if you remember, I only added it to the top of the leaf, and then I added a bit down around the end of the leaf. So that's my Payne's gray, and again, cleaning my brush, really squeezing the color out, not going to my thinner, because you'll be in trouble if you start playing in that thinner, in the paint thinner. Okay, so then I had a yellow green. I'm going to pick up some Payne's or some sap green, and I'll put a little blob of green. So all I've done is taken that map that I already painted in acrylic, and I've put wet color on it, and so that I can paint my strokes wet into wet. Now this is a number 10, and I'm thinking that's probably a good size. No, I think I'll go with a larger size. I think I'll go with a 12. I like big strokes. I like big, fat, voluptuous strokes. Doesn't mean to say you have to do big strokes. You could do several little strokes if you wanted, and if you look at any of the Russian artists, some of them did a lot of strokes to get to fill the one side of the leaf. So I'm just going to pull my palette over here again to show you what I'm doing. I wish I had a better setup here, but I don't. So it's a yellow-green leaf, and here, maybe push that up a bit. This is sap green. Now, really, 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 really important is loading the brush. I don't want a lot of paint in this brush. I want as little as I can really work with. But what I do want is for the entire brush, for every hair that's in this brush, to be surrounded by some paint. So you can see I'm pulling a little bit from the puddle, but not very much, and then I work it into my brush. Spread the brush out. I don't know whether you can see that or not. Spread the brush hairs out, then I'll flip it over and spread it out again. And if you look at this, look at the width of this brush now. but I don't have a huge amount of paint in here. So this would be my yellow-green color. And I usually find that as I work through the leaves get easier because my brush becomes more flexible. The more you use it, the hairs kind of decide to behave after a while and move all over the place. So I could use the paint at 100% at that color, or I could come in and just lighten it a little bit. So I've just added hardly any, just a little wee bit of yellow here to lighten it. Now I could use white, and I will use white probably at some point. So loading the brush is very, very important before you do that stroke. If you think you can just go in and grab some paint and then come over here and do a stroke, it's not going to work. So just remember that. I won't probably show you again. Just put my palette over here. And let's look at this leaf. There was my spot down here, if you remember. Chisel points to the spot. I'm going to touch right by the vein line, press, and pull towards the spot. Now, I'm not going to reload, and hopefully, I hope you can see this. There's a little bit of alizarin crimson and Payne's gray on the end of my brush, which means the color on this brush has now been changed. It's darker than when I started, I hope. And as we move down through the leaf, let's look at this again, point the chisel. And I'll often, you'll see me doing this. It's not because I don't know what I'm doing. It's because I'm trying to make sure that my chisel is pointed, and I'm making sure that I start in the right spot. So I'm just on the vein line, and this is like an S stroke. And then I'll do another one, and this should be even darker because I'm picking up color as I go. And then I'll go to the dark side of the leaf, and I'm going to come over here and pull a stroke away and pull another one. Now you really can't even see those, they're so dark, but I've laid the groundwork for this. So I'm just going to wipe my brush, wipe it out again. I'm going to go back to that pile of paint that I had over here, work it back into my brush. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. And so now I'm going to put a second layer of strokes on this leaf. And with each layer that you add, you'll put in fewer strokes, and those fewer strokes will get lighter with each layer. So this is my initial layer, kind of laid it out. Now I'm going to lighten the paint slightly, so I think I'll lighten it again. If you work in kind of the same area with your paint, I can see the color I used before is over here. You can see that right there. So I need to go lighter than that. And I'm going to stick with yellow for now. Again, trying to make sure the paint's really well blended into the brush. Maybe lighten it even again. What do you think? You really can't make a big mistake. Well, I suppose you could, but hopefully you won't. Okay, so I said lighter, fewer, and probably a little shorter in length. So in order to do fewer, I had 3 strokes on this side to begin with. So now if I'm going to do fewer than 3, I think you all know what that is. That's 2, I think, right? And I'll just start with like an S-like stroke. So there's the beginning of the stroke. The beginning of the stroke, I'm in between. I'll press and pull, and then I'll add another one, and it'll kind of be over top of the one that was there, but that's okay. Now, without reloading my brush, I'm going to go over to the dark side again. And I only had 2 strokes, but I think I'm going to have to put 2 in here. There's 1, 2, and you can see that they're darker. So, wipe your brush out. Let's lighten the paint again. This time I'm going to grab some white. I'm going to spread the paint through my brush. So for the third layer, this is where you have to look at your leaf and decide what you want to do. I'd like to highlight, and make sure my brush is loaded properly. I'd like to go back to the top of the leaf and highlight it, only because it's easy for you to see. So That first stroke was a comma. I pulled it too far. Don't like it at all. But that's okay. And I don't think I'm going to do anything to it. I'm going to come over to the dark side. And I have another dog hair in my brush. Sorry about that, but... And I'm going to highlight the edge of this. So, very sharp chisel, a little press. I could put another one in there, but I'm not going to. Now, is that my best leaf? No, but it's good enough for now. So, let's do the other yellow-green leaf that's right here. It's still a little shiny. So my first step is to put the alizarin crimson on the outside of the vein, around the bottom of the leaf, move about halfway up, grab some Payne's Gray, deepen the shadow on the outside, deepen the edge. You'll notice I use the same brush for all the shadow color. I don't switch brushes in between, just wipe the brush. And I'll pick up some Payne's Gray, or sorry, did the Payne's Gray. I'll pick up the sap green and I'll fill in that little mapped out bit of color that I have. And now we'll come back here and I'll go back to that original color that I used on this leaf. I'm going to try and paint this a little bit faster. Start with my dark color. This time the curve's the other way, so it's easier for me to move the tray and pull the strokes this way. So, comma, S, S, and up the other side. And you can see I paid no attention to the part of that leaf that was showing. The other leaf I painted. I'm going to lighten this slightly. Going to go in between the strokes now, so I'll do an S, an S. Maybe I'll just put one stroke there, wipe my brush out, lighten again. This is where I added a bit of white. Now, this leaf is kind of on top of this leaf. It wouldn't hurt if this was a little lighter than that one. It doesn't matter. It's not something you have to strive for, but sometimes it's nice. I'm just going to come back in here, add a highlight, and make sure that chisel on your brush is always a chisel. If it's not, you won't have a beautiful leaf. So I'm going to come back over here and add a little highlight. Now, I like the look of that leaf a lot better than I do this one, but here's the thing. If you can paint it this well, which is not that well, but leave it alone. Just leave it alone. I have this to paint yet, and then I have line work to go on, and by the time I do all that, you're not going to see what I see that I don't like about this leaf. So there we have 2 leaves done, and you can see that once you get to this stage, you know, if you're not trying to teach somebody how to do this and you're just sitting quietly painting by yourself, I'd probably have most of these leaves done already. So I'll squeeze that paint out of my brush, again, not going to my thinner. I dropped the other brush on the floor. Hang on a second. There we go. So on this leaf, this is my blue-green leaf, we do the same thing. I'm going to put my alizarin crimson in on the dark side, and you can see that this leaf's going to be on top of these, and so that that color doesn't, this light part of this leaf doesn't affect the dark that I want on the end here, I'm just going to take my brush and I'll just wipe that out as if I hadn't painted that. And then I'll paint the other leaf over top. So there's my alizarin. And some Payne's Gray. We'll go down here for that. Now my blue-green, I have a, this is Viridian over here, and I think I'll lighten it just a little bit with some white. It's easier to see the color as well. And I have color in this brush, so I think I'll switch again. Let's go over here. Although I like that because it grayed that color up. Did you see that when we added the alizarin crimson, which is a red, and it mixed with that Viridian, it grayed the color up nicely. So there we go. Brush is loaded. And let's come over here. There's my spot, the end of the tip of the leaf. Point the chisel. This is a comma-like stroke. You can see I grabbed some of that alizarin crimson with that first stroke, which I really didn't want to do, but I really don't care, so we just continue on. Again, don't sweat the little stuff. Just worry about the big stuff. So there's my leaf. And you can't really see those last strokes because it's so dark. One whole layer without reloading. So now I'll lighten the color again. Second layer. I'll come back in, point my chisel, kind of a nest-like stroke. Put one more down here. Go up the other side. Again, quite dark. And I'll come back and lighten it one more time. And we'll see how that looks. Now, the nice thing is if you get this all done and you didn't have enough light or you want more dark, it's very easy to glaze over top. So let's come back in here. I'm going to add some light here. I'm going to fix my chisel, and I'm going to add some light here. Wipe my brush. I'm going to add 2 highlights to the edge of this one. Why? Because it's sitting on top of this leaf. Do you see that? So I'll just lighten that up there. Now again, not my best leaf. I think I'd like to add one more stroke in here. Kind of a medium color. I shouldn't, but I will. That's the nice thing about oils, is it's not dry until you're done. That's probably good enough. Okay, so there are 3 leaves. There's actually another one in here. Why don't I do that one for you as well? Find my brush again. Let's finish that off, and then I can tuck some flowers in behind. So here's my alizarin. Now, I didn't add the medium to that before, and I can feel as soon as I go to put that alizarin on there that it's grabbing. So I'll just add a little bit of medium to the leaf. Now I'll go back and grab that alizarin, and now it moves very easily. So just a shine of medium. Now this leaf is was supposed to be underneath to begin with. I didn't really notice it until now, so we'll see how it turns out. I don't know what I'll do with it. There's some Payne's Gray. There's some Payne's Gray. And let's put a little blue in here, blue-green. And let's see what happens. So we're going to come back here. Fix my brush. And I'll leave it underneath, so I won't bother trying to fill up the strokes on that side. We'll lighten this a little bit. You can see how long it takes to load the brush. It doesn't take any time at all to paint the leaf, but all that time just loading the brush, that's going to be too light. So just a second. If you load your brush and you come over here, you can see how different it is from what you've already got, and can kind of judge whether or not you should reload before. So that's okay. I'll lighten it again. Come back, put a highlight stroke here. And you notice I don't finish the strokes. And over here, a nice little highlight. I could put another little bit of highlight in there. You kind of have to decide for yourself when you look at it. Does it need a little bit more? That's probably good enough. So those are the leaves. I've got a whole ton here to paint. I'm not going to do that in the video today. I'm going to do try and get through all of the flowers. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what's happening. Just got to check my brush here. I think I've got a better one. Hang on. So this is just a liner brush, just checking the hairs. And I usually wait to put all of the veins and line work on the leaves until I'm all done, because then I do them all at once and then it looks like the same person did them all. Sometimes if you try and paint a tray over 2 or 3 days, you can see the different you can see the mood you were in on those days. So let's just look at this for a second and I'll just show you what I would do it towards the end. But this is just a little bit of vein line. Not my best vein line, but good enough. So I usually use the color that was in the leaf. I also use, you'll see me dipping into that painting medium. I should have probably put more on my brush to do those first two. That's a little light at the beginning, but that's much better. And as far as line work for the outside of the leaf, you can do none, or you could do a lot. Oh my goodness, there's Larissa. Larissa is the master of Jostova. She is probably the most beautiful. First of all, she's beautiful, but her stroke work is just unbelievable when you watch her paint. It just almost brings tears to your eyes. She does it so effortlessly, and every single stroke is perfect. So I'm not going to put any line work around the edges here. I'd sooner wait till it dries a bit, because if I don't like what I've done, I can wipe it off. If I don't like what I do right now, I can't wipe it off. I'd have to wipe off all of the leaves. So I'll just leave it there for now for the leaves. Let's talk about these little leaves. Might as well do that while we're on leaves. I just want to put a little bit of medium. It looks like these are all little leaves out here. So, and I said don't use too much. And so I'll just take some of that off. And so it's the same thing that we did here. I add alizarin crimson to the same areas that I put the shadow in before, and I'll add a bit of Payne's gray towards the ends. I've got a little bud here, which normally I would do first because I would want these on top, but I'm not doing that today. And a little bit of the base color. Now I really don't need it because these are so little. And I think I'll go, oh, this is a smaller brush. No, this is my 10. Just wonder if I've got an 8 handy. Oh, I do. Hang on. No, I don't. Okay, that's fine. We'll just use this one. So these little leaves, I'm just going to load my brush up again with the color. You don't have to do too much work here. This is I'll probably just pull a couple of C-like strokes. So here's one, and then go back and pull another. And then I'll highlight that just a little bit, but not a lot, because they're towards the outside of the tray, and I'd sooner keep everything towards the outside a little darker. So I'll maybe just come back here on my brush. Look at your brush before you use it. And there's a little highlight. Now this leaf doesn't get its shape until I put the line work on it. And when I do the line work, I'll carry the lines right out beyond the edge here. I'll almost grab some of that black in the background and make it part of the leaf. So let's just go back and we'll do, there's one here. And I'll just do this one at the same time. I would normally tuck these under, but we're not going to worry about that today. Again, make sure your brush is loaded properly. And that's all I'm going to do with those. So those are pretty simple. So let's talk about these flowers in the middle. Again, maybe we'll just do the blue one first. So I just want to add a little bit of medium, and that's way too much, but I'm going to wipe it off, you know that. So there's a little, make that nice and slick. And you can see where my leaf went over my flower, but I'll just remove that now. You see how nice that comes off? And that'll be good enough. So on the flowers, same as on the leaves, you're going to use this as your map. The first thing I'm going to do is add alizarin crimson. Remember the 4 spots? This is separating that bowl from the rest of the flower. And the top back outside, in the bowl or in the center, and all around that spot I painted the strokes to, which is down here, and then separating levels. Then I'm going to pick up some Payne's Gray. I'm going to deepen. I really didn't want that much, but we just deepen the outside of this in the bowl. I want to add some around that spot. I can even carry it out to the edges of these petals. And then when it comes to adding color to the flower, I've got my blue over here. I don't know whether I can put this where you can see it or not. See both. Yeah, maybe. There's some blue. So if I wanted to gray that blue up, remember I said to you before I put a little orange on my palette. And you see how that grays that blue up nicely? Because I don't want a really sharp blue flower, but I just want to gray it up slightly. So let's see if my brush is going to do this for me. I've got another one here. No, I better try this one. Let's see how this works. So there's my blue. Just hold my palette here so it doesn't move all over the place. I'm just going to mix myself a bit more paint here. Again, there's a little orange, and that orange will gray that color up. And I'm just going to make it a little darker to start with, so I've got somewhere to go with the light. and make sure the brush is loaded. And I could put a little bit in here. It almost looks just to wet the piece down a bit, but you don't have to on the flowers. There's not enough space to worry about, and we'll be going over them a couple of times. So here we go. My spot, let's put the spot here. So all of the strokes in the flower are going to relate to that spot, right? You can use S strokes, comma strokes, partial C strokes. You could use flat strokes. The type of stroke you use doesn't really matter as long as it's going to the right spot. I think what I'll do is start with an S, and we'll see how that works. So here it is. Chisel, press, and in towards the spot. I think I'll do another S. Will I? Or I could do a comma, so you would fill that in, but it won't be big enough. So let's try it. An S, and towards the spot, and then a comma. I've got a little bit of green in there that I don't want. And there's one petal blocked in. Reload my brush. Now I've got to come over here. I'm going to do an S again, but it's going to have to wiggle almost. See, look at how I had to really make it an S to get it to go back into that spot. I'm going to do another one here, and then I'll do a comma. Now you can't worry about the other flowers that are there. We worry about that when we get to it. Let's come back here. And then I'll go to the other side. So you see, I kind of work my way around, always thinking about that spot, right? I'll pull, like I think, a couple of commas there to finish that off. So where are we at here? It's fine. Not my best flower, but it'll do. Let's come over here and let's pull a petal that's kind of tucked up here. The paint's not moving, so I'm just going to add a little bit of medium to it. Come back here. That's better. You'll find working with the oils that sometimes it gets hard to see. So I'm just going to come up and use little strokes like I did when we did the white to kind of mimic the outside of the flower. I can go in and do the center now. I can tell you that I usually don't. I usually finish around the outside and then come back and do the center, but this way you'll be able to see the flower a little better. So there's my spot. I think to start with, make life easy, I'll just pull one stroke towards that spot. And then we'll come up around the edge of this bowl and pull. Don't know why that paint's so dry. Now again, you'll see this better once, I got to move that out of the way. Once we start lightening this. We'll put some more layers in there. And I'm just going to leave the center like that for now. I could tuck another one back in here. And I'm going to lighten this up now, this paint color. Now you could put 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers. I added too much orange there. Trying to hurry through this. Hurrying's not great for your painting, but get myself a color here that I'm happy with. So I want it a little lighter. It's definitely grayer because I put that orange in the blue, which is kind of nice. And let's come back here and see what we can do with this now. So again, like the leaves, I'm probably just going to do fewer strokes. And so you can see it's just building from light to dark. Might throw another little stroke in here. Add a little highlight here. Just a little bit around the top, but I don't want to touch the back of this because I want it to stay dark. Okay, then let's see what else we can do with this front part of the flower. I'm just having to load my brush here. So let's come back again. One more time. Now I don't want to get too light, so I'll maybe add a little bit here on the side, but I'm thinking that's enough for down there. Maybe I'll put another one here. And I won't lighten any of the back of that. I want to leave it darker. So now let's come back to these strokes in the center. I'm just going to add a little bit of medium to my brush. Make sure it's loaded. I don't want a lot of paint, but I want it well loaded. I think I'll lighten that up again. And I'm going to come back. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Oops, my dogs are barking. Hope that doesn't bother the neighbors. You can see that orange coming through here. Isn't that pretty? I'm going to come back here and pull some strokes as if they're tucked in. And then I just want to add a layer in the front here. And this is probably just about done. So let's just see. This is where you can really make a mess. So there's my spot. I think I'll do something like this. Sure the brush is loaded properly. And I'll just add some little strokes to fill in this space a bit. When you don't see my hand, it's loading paint into the brush. Oops. Oops. So, I don't like what happened in here. What I don't like is that I can see the ends of the strokes. But in oils, that's an easy fix because I've got a little mop here and I can just come in and tap that and have the ends of those strokes disappear and keep my dark. So it's that easy to fix. And as far as centers go, on this one I wouldn't do very much. There's already shadow color in there I could add. Oh, probably I'd just add kind of a simple, maybe even just a dot I could highlight that dot, though I wouldn't just leave it like that. And I would probably leave it there. Now again, line work. I could use line work to exaggerate some of this. I could use line work to try and add more highlight. I think what I would like to do, though, while I look at this, just so I don't, I think I'd like to pick up some pure white over here and just maybe touch the tops of these front petals so that the light actually looks like it's there. Do you see that? How just grab the edge, watch. Just grab the edge. I can even do these. And not a lot, just in the, oh, didn't like that too much. Just in the front part of the flower here. And then leave the rest. That was probably too much. I don't think I liked like what I did here. I'd probably go back and I would darken that up. Just a little bit too light, but easy to fix in oils, right? So these flowers are done exactly the same as this one. Let's do one of these yellow flowers. And again, same procedure as before. We're going to use a little medium. A little medium. I don't want a lot, so I'll just wipe it off. I shine the surface. Here's my alizarin, top, back, outside, in the bowl or in the center, and all around the spot I painted the strokes to. And I'm going to put some back here where these little bits of buds are while I'm working on that flower. Here's some Payne's Gray in the bowl or in the center, all around the spot. Separating levels, I'll just separate those petals. And again, a little bit around the outside of the tray. And that's that. Wipe my brush out. Now these, I'm just loading my brush with medium yellow. And let's see how that looks. Again, hard to tell until you get the whole tray painted whether or not you're going to like the color. But we'll see. I'll be pulling into that alizarin crimson. So let's just start. This is kind of like a C stroke. And there's another one. And you can see how it pulls into that alizarin. And the strokes are getting darker and darker. And as we get towards the back, I'll just pull some strokes. And like the rest, I'll reload and add some white to my brush, lighten the color. I'm going to come back and decide what I'm going to do here. I'll just add another C stroke. I could put an S on top of that. My brush wasn't loaded too well, and you can see the brush marks, which is okay, but it's kind of nice when it kind of blends in. So there's some highlight on that one, and here's a little bit of highlight on this one. And I'm not going to touch the back of that flower. I don't know whether you can see that or not, but you really don't see the back. It's kind of going to get lost in the background of the tray. And as far as the little buds go, I would just pull just some strokes back in there to make it look like there might have been something back there. And for a center for this one, there's lots of choices. I could just do little dots, or I could try and pull something a little bit more exciting. I don't know whether I can. I didn't check this brush out. I usually don't do line work till I know my liner's going to work well, but I could just come in here and pull you know, some little doodads and put little dots and spots, and you can highlight some of those if you want, or just leave them. Again, when it's towards the outside of the tray, we don't want to do too much because we want to keep them dark. I'm just going to add a line here so that you can see what I talked to you about, adding line work to complete the shape. I could come over here and you see, just add some kind of a line like this, and even though my stroke didn't do that, that would give a little bit of shape, would indicate that maybe there's a petal, two petals there now. I normally wouldn't do them that light, but I don't think you'd see them well enough if I didn't lighten the paint up. So there's all these little flowers here too, the little 5-stroke flowers. And again, those are all done in the same method as we used for the rest of the tray. I'm going to put a little bit of medium on here, and I don't want a lot, so I would wipe that off. Oops, I don't want to get my cloth in the... But I wipe that off just so it shines. And then same thing, alizarin crimson in the center, around the outside, some Payne's gray in the center. You'll notice I put lots of color down, not just a little spot. It's a big area, because if you don't put a lot of dark down, you can't get light. Let's try this brush and see if it's going to be a good size for this. I thought I had a number 8, but it doesn't look like I have one here. Oh, hang on, I think I found it. So I found it. This this color is, oh, it's almost a moving towards the lavender kind of color. So I'm in my blue. I'm going to pick up some alizarin and just come in and change that color a little bit. Some white in here, put some more blue in. Didn't want it that alizarin-y. And again, load your brush. So these were just little simple 5-stroke flowers. So that was a head, do you remember? And an arm, and another arm, and another arm, or a leg, I guess. And that's all there is to that. I'm going to lighten the color up and come back. And the petals towards the center are the ones that you want to keep the lightest. Now that I have a lighter color, you notice I took a little bit more time with that one. So again, just 5 strokes, and a center for that might be, again, I probably would keep it pretty simple. There's a little red dot, and sometimes, well, maybe I'll put some orange so you can see it. Sometimes doesn't want to stick. Sometimes simple is better than not. Now, I'm not thrilled with the colors here. It's, to be honest, I'm not trying to make excuses, but it's hard for me to see. When I'm painting in oils, I usually have to tilt my tray so that the shine, I can see what I'm doing, and of course I can't do that right now. It's sitting in the open and the light's shining on it, and so it's hard for me to see. But I would probably correct that a little bit, maybe put a little bit more alizarin in here instead of having it kind of look like this one. Now here's my plan. I've shown you, let's see now, everything that's on here, the leaves. and how I tuck the little buds in the back just with a few little strokes. And what my plan is now is for me to finish this tray. I'm not going to do it on camera, and I will post a picture of it finished. And when you see it finished, there won't be much more on it than what I've shown you. The only other thing that I do add are filler strokes, little branches and so on. And those are simply done with a liner, and sometimes I'll just come in and pull, you know, little strokes that fill in around the edge. I don't know whether you can see that or not. And it's, but whether or not I'll do that on this, I don't know, because obviously I have to get all the flowers in and all the leaves, and then decide what needs to be filled and what doesn't. I can tell you that the line work that I put around here will be gone because I'm not enjoying that, but I did it so that you can see that you can use line work to change the shape of a petal or a leaf. It doesn't mean that you're going to do that, but that was just an illustration. Unlikely I'm going to put much line work on these flowers once they're done, and I'm probably not going to add too much to the leaves. So unless, if you have questions, if none of this makes sense, then you have to just write them in the comments, and I'll find them, and I'll try and answer your questions. It would be fun to paint this whole thing for you, but you'll be here probably another hour, and you don't want to do that. So it's hard to keep these videos short and still give you the information that I want to give you. But I would suggest that if you're interested in trying this, the first thing you do is go back to the first video where we talk about the strokes and the shape of the strokes and the direction of the strokes, because this is easy once you know that. And if you don't understand the strokes and you don't understand the direction or how to get there, then this becomes very difficult. When I get this all done, I think I may add glazing to the lesson. I don't know. We'll see what it looks like when it's done. But the next lesson will be a look at what we've done, and then I'm going to do a little bit of border work for you. And maybe at that point, if I think it needs to be glazed, I'll wait and I'll glaze the piece for you at that time. So I think that's it. If you have any questions, again, post them in the comments, and I'll try and answer them, get back to you. And the next video will be probably a week from now, I'm thinking. So I think that's all. So have a great day, and thanks so much for joining me. I hope this helps some of you out that are trying to get through this style. And when I get this done, I'll post a picture so you can see it. So take care. Have a great day.